Apple's Big Developer Conference kicked off with a huge keynote, over 2 hours long, that was packed full of announcements. Some were big new products like the Mac Pro, some were tiny little software details, like, hey, in iOS 13, you'll finally be able to rotate videos. Here are the 5 things Apple announced that are going to have the biggest impact on the industry. So everybody's talking about the Mac Pro and the Pro Display XDR, but at those sky-high prices, Apple's going to be lucky to sell even 1 million of them. They're very cool products for serious creative professionals, but they don't mean anything at all for most of the billion-plus Apple users out there. Some of the other things Apple announced will have much bigger consequences for you. Take the new privacy stuff in iOS 13. It's not sexy, but it may drastically change the way popular apps operate. Right now, many apps let you sign in using Google or Facebook, which is convenient, but it also gives the app and Google or Facebook all sorts of data about you. Personal info you didn't even know you were sharing. The new Sign In with Apple feature gives you the same convenience, but it protects your privacy by sharing no hidden personal details. It can even hide your email address behind a randomized fake forwarding address. Apple's making a policy for the App Store that says that any app that allows the Sign In with Google or Facebook buttons also has to include Sign In with Apple. Plus, Apple's cracking down on apps that scan nearby Wi-Fi hotspots and Bluetooth beacons to figure out your location even though they didn't ask for it. These changes may sound kind of dry, but it means that thousands of popular apps are going to have to find a way to make money other than gobbling up all your personal info without telling you about it. And that could be huge. Another big change is the split of iOS and what they're now calling iPadOS. For a long time now, the iPad has had features the iPhone doesn't. But they're growing even further apart with all sorts of multitasking split view stuff and support for USB drives in the Files app and so on. It's an indication that Apple is actively growing the iPad into a product that you can do real work with. And as it lifts away the limitations of iOS, it no longer seems appropriate to call it iOS. When you think about it, the writing was on the wall from the moment Apple replaced the Lightning port on the iPad Pro with a USB-C port. iPads are no longer just big iPhones, and it's going to become really apparent as the iPadOS grows further from iOS over the next couple years. You know what else is going to become apparent over the next couple of years? That Apple has a real legit gaming platform. I mean, we all know that 1 billion people game on the iPhone, but many core gamers don't think of that as real gaming. And nobody games on a Mac, right? At WWDC, Apple announced that the Apple TV, iPhone, and iPad will officially support Xbox One and PS4 controllers. That completely changes the game, no pun intended. That means big things for the Apple Arcade service coming this fall. Developers can now make real games for it, the kind they're used to making that rely on the controllers that tens of millions of core gamers use every day. It's a complete capitulation by Apple. They could have done this years ago, but instead, they insisted on only supporting specially licensed MFI controllers. This is concrete evidence that now that Apple has got a subscription service to get off the ground, they're really listening to game developers and gamers. Apple's making some big changes to watchOS too. There's the usual slate of new apps and watch faces, but there are even bigger changes to the way you get apps in the first place. Right now, every watch app needs an iPhone companion app and it has to be installed through your iPhone. With watchOS 6, you'll be able to browse the App Store, buy, download, and run apps entirely on your Apple Watch. So far, the Apple Watch has been strictly an iPhone accessory, and maybe with watchOS 6 you'll still need an iPhone to set up your watch. But Apple's getting dangerously close to making it possible to buy and use an Apple Watch completely on its own. Apple Watch may soon be the entry point into the Apple ecosystem for millions of people, the first Apple device they buy. It's not a bad idea for such a popular and coveted piece of tech. Finally, maybe the biggest thing Apple announced at WWDC was Project Catalyst. This used to go by the codename Marzipan, and it's a set of tools that make it super easy for any developer with an iOS app to get it up and running on the Mac with very little extra code. Apple said developers they tested this with got their Mac apps up and running in as little as a day. Once there are tens of thousands of popular iPhone and iPad apps on the Mac, we could be looking at a real surge in Mac sales. I mean, a lot more people have an iPhone than a Mac. When they go to buy a computer, are they going to buy the one that has all the exact same apps they love on their iPhone? Or are they going to buy the one where they have to start over with a new software library from scratch? Making it super easy to convert iOS apps into Mac apps could result in the greatest selling point the Mac has had in a decade or more. Now, this isn't suddenly going to make laptops and desktops a hot commodity again. The world is still going to be all about those phones and tablets. But it could, after a couple of years, completely change our expectations for apps. We may start to expect any good app to follow us seamlessly from phone to tablet to laptop to desktop. And that all starts with Apple taking the world's most influential development environment and bringing it to the Mac. Now, if only that Mac Pro were a few $1,000s cheaper.